Hey guys, I want to talk about social change today. This is usually the last chapter that I do, so it's always an interesting one to end the semester with. It ends, yeah, usually end the semester with. Well, but what is social change? It's altering and modifying, our culture over time, our social institutions. Um, some social change is much more evident than others. Some happens a lot faster than others. Some takes a lot more time. But basically, it's changing our culture and our structure and our organization of our society. Um, the basic characteristics is it happens all the time. Like I said, some of it we notice, but a lot of it we don't. For whatever reason, we're always, we're definitely pretty self-involved with our own lives and what we have going on. But it happens all the time. Some change is intentional, but some is unplanned. Like when some certain legislation gets passed, there might be groups who oppose that legislation and they fight back against that and maybe bring some other kind of legislation out or make something happen. So sometimes change is intentional, sometimes it's not. It's controversial. I mean, like I told you before, I don't like change. With COVID and having to wear a mask all the time in public or when I'm around people, I don't like it. I do it because it's the right thing to do. It needs to be done. But again, I'm not big on change. But it is always controversial. And like I said, COVID is definitely a big example of that. Both with not just the mask and social distancing, but just life in general. It's made a huge change to our society, to all societies, and to the way we go about daily life. Some change matters more than others. That's pretty self-explanatory. And then some change is controllable, some is not. Um, all right, sorry, just had to find the next place I wanted to go with this. So we've got this change, and what caused this change? Well, it's collective behavior. And collective behavior, it's usually a large number of people that engage in that behavior, whether it's attempting to seek change or whether to prevent change. Um, but they try to change the norms and laws, and they push for that cultural and structural change. And like I said, it's a large group of people that do that. And within collective behavior, you've got two different types of groups of people. You've got the crowd behavior and you have mass behavior. Crowd behavior means you're specifically in the same vicinity, the same area as somebody. So you're physically around that group of people. Whereas mass behavior, you're not in the same physical area, but yet you still respond or do or engage in certain behaviors or try to change certain behaviors the same way that others are, even if you're not the same in the same place at the same time. So again, crowd behavior, you're specifically physically a part of a group of a crowd. Mass behavior, you're not, but you're still participating in that change and trying to get certain things done. Okay. Two terms I want to bring up real quick. Because we're talking about crowds, mob, and riot. They're not the same thing. People talk about them as the same, and a lot of people don't even know what they actually mean. A lot of people use them incorrectly or tell people the wrong definite and incorrect definition of them. But they're both big. They're both emotional crowds. Um, they both engage in violence. So they're both emotional. They're both engage in violence. However, one has a goal and the other one does not. Like a mob, they have a goal. They have things pre-planned and set out, and then they set out and do that. Whereas a riot, it's unplanned. It's a spur of the moment type of thing. They're emotional and violent, but it's spur of the moment. So, sometimes you'll see riots at sporting events or when it comes to maybe like certain countries and with governments, or whatever the case might be. So again, the big difference between mob and riot is that a mob is planned, a riot is not. They're both violent and emotional, but that's the big difference, that one is planned and one is not planned. Some other terms that I want to talk about with social change. One is rumors. We all know what rumors is, and this is a form of mass behavior. I talked about mass behavior being behavior that you engage in with many other people, even if you're not physically together. So rumor is a mass behavior, but it's an unsubstantiated report about somebody or something. That's why it's called a rumor, because there's no fact behind it, and at least initially, a rumor is short-lived, and usually whenever trying to think of a better way to say this. It's usually short-lived, and it usually comes to an end whenever either another rumor comes about that people want to talk about, or there's some kind of factual information that finally comes out. But again, a rumor is called a rumor just because of that. It's unsubstantiated. Some rumors have a long life, not a whole lot, but some have a long life because they hit a responsive chord. For instance, rumors of mass poisoning of soft drinks in multiple countries. That's a rumor that's got a lot of pub, and it's something that went on for quite a while. Let's see here. A few other terms: fad and fashion. With fad, you have a temporary but very wildly enthusiastically embraced activity, whether it's like an actual activity, like a lot of times you see these challenges on social media where people, like with a cinnamon challenge, and people were challenged to eat a spoonful of cinnamon. That would be a fad. But also, it's not just an activity, but can also be a product. So like I think about in the 80s, whenever Cabbage Patch Dolls were a big fad, or hair scrunchies, or certain hairstyles or certain types of clothing. Whereas in the last 10, 15 years, things like silly bands, things like that are definitely a fad. Again, people embrace it very enthusiastically, but it's short-lived. And some fads come in and out of fashion. They'll go out for a while, and then they'll come back and be a fad again. Like one of them, with the examples, is Pokemon cards. Like when I was literally probably in middle school, so this was around 2000, Pokemon cards were a big hit. I was somebody that had all of them. I wish I still had them because I would sell them for money, but that's another story. But the years later, then it kind of died off in popularity, and then it came back again real strong, a number of years later. So, again, some of them go in and out over time. Some just become a norm. Like smoking, it started out as a fad, but now, it's become a norm for a lot of people. So, then you have fashion, and that is a type of fad, and it applies specifically to style, whether that means like shirts or hairstyles, which is, you notice I don't have any hair. Maybe like certain makeup trends, those are, that's fashion. We know what fashion is. But also, I just now really thought of this. It's not just having to do with individuals, but it also have to do with businesses too. Like maybe the types of the color schemes that people use, that businesses use, or the colors of buildings, that's fashion as well. So I just now thought of that. Talk about social movement. We talked about social change and how does that happen? Well, because of a social movement. It's an organized group that acts to promote or to resist social change, through that action. So when it comes to a social movement, it has to have a lot of people behind it for it to actually be called a movement. You know, like the civil rights movement or the multiple women's rights movements or the LGBTQ movement. So there's a lot of different um, movements that have happened because they've had enough people behind them, had enough support, and also had enough influence from people that are higher up on the social ladder. So there are a lot of different types of social movements. I'm not going to get into that. You should be able to see those in the PowerPoint. But why does a social movement happen? There's usually one or two reasons why it happens. And I'm going to go through these theories real quick. There's relative deprivation theory, and that says that social movement happens because people are more likely to seek out change because they're missing something, they're being prevented or from having something, or they're just what I just said. They're being withheld certain rights that other people have. So they are very much more likely to seek out to promote social change. Whereas declining privilege theory, that's where people would push back against social change because it would. But people would push back against social change with declining privilege theory because they don't want their privileges to decline. They've had these privileges for years. They've gotten so used to them, and they don't want to share them with anybody else, which, I mean, in a way you can't blame somebody, but at the same time, it's not right. But these people have a decline in their status and power, so they push back against that. They either resist the change or they push for even more change of their own to get their rights and whatnot back, or their privileges. It's not even about rights, it's about privileges at that point. But yeah, some people are deprived of certain things, so they push for social movements. And some people have a declining privilege, so they either push against them or they push for a whole new movement for themselves to try to get their benefits back or their privileges back. That is all for that, guys. Thank you very much. I will talk to you later.